We have international capabilities by our partnership with the UX Fellows Global Alliance, which allows us to reach internationally, and we've done work in 15 plus countries. We like to think of our key strengths. It's really the diversity and the flexibility of our research portfolio, the toolbox that we can bring to bear on the questions that you're confronting today. We also have a significant presence and understanding of the multicultural marketing work that's happening in today's world. And then lastly, it's the international expertise that we bring. We have a number of individuals who speak fluently a variety of different important languages today. So our company, just to give you a little bit of a background on the perspective that we have, our company is predominantly of Hispanic heritage. We have individuals with Cuban, Argentinian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Mexican backgrounds, in addition to individuals with Chinese, Italian, English, and American heritage. So we've got a lot of understanding of a lot of different cultures and places to be. Just in the last 6 months, our teams themselves have deployed to China, India, Japan, Germany, France, and across the United States, where we conducted the research. Last year, we were all across Central America, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and Finland. So we've got a lot of international expertise that we can bring to bear on the questions that you have. Another aspect of the perspective that we have is just the diversity of the clients that we're working with. These are people who are involved in online advertising, in consumer electronics, automotive manufacturing, finance, just to mention a few of these. Some of the testing that we're doing includes mobile applications. That's a prominent one today. We're also doing interactive kiosk work, website content. We're looking at advertising, A/B type testing, but we're also doing some strategic big picture work on assessing consumer electronics product strategy fits for some of our clients across global marketplaces, which is a big aspect of UX research. So when really, what are we talking about as kind of the issue, the research issue that UX researchers could confront, and how this can impact the research that you're doing today? So obviously, we're all charged with delivering the most accurate feedback that we can to derive the most effective designs and allow for the best creative decision making. You want to be on the money and on target. I think one of the key aspects of any piece of research that any person is doing is to remain skeptical of the initial research takeaways that you may be finding. There could be false positives, there could be false negatives. This obviously will depend upon the importance of the business decision at hand. By that I mean be more skeptical of the results when you're making big decisions versus some of the initial gating factor types of research that we're all involved in. One thing that I think all of us are confronting, and we realize on a daily basis in our personal lives and in our professional lives, is both our marketplace, our consumers, and our fellow citizens. It's growing increasingly complex, if you will. What this recalls is an enhanced research rigor coupled with methodological triangulation. By triangulation, I mean bringing different processes, different data streams that are independent of each other that help you point towards what's the real answer to the question at hand. This is what will derive success for you, I believe, we believe. So what are the drivers of diversity that we're seeing across the globe today? What do you as UX researchers want to consider today? This is driven out of a presentation that I gave at Amazon's corporate offices at the World Usability Day here in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, and it went over relatively well. So we decided to bring this out to a greater marketplace today. So one of the things that we're seeing in the United States is an increasing racial and ethnic diversity. It's possible that America may be more diverse than at any time in its history. It's certainly its recent history, and it's projected to become even more diverse in the coming decades. So this is an issue and a challenge for anybody involved in UX research to make certain that your research design is accounting for this particular factor. Another consideration that I thought was quite intriguing was Asia has replaced Latin America as the biggest source of new immigrants coming to the United States. This is primarily driven by individuals coming from South Asia and East Asia. In fact, there's been a net out-migration since 2009 of Hispanic individuals in the United States. So that gives rise to the question of some of the things that were happening in last year's election, whether it's valid or not. Another consideration that I think we as UX researchers and involved with our marketing team members, it's the focus on the millennial generation. These are individuals who were born after 1980. This is commonly the one that businesses are watching. These are the individuals who are collecting the wealth and the spending power that more and more of us are focused on. So our design decisions, our marketing decisions, a lot of the research considerations that we're all paying attention to, they're focused on the millennials today. Another thing that I was especially pleased with is that when we pulled the statistics for how are women playing a part in today's business world and professional world, interestingly is that women comprise the largest share of professionals in the United States and an increasing number of executive roles across the business world today. Women are a force going into the future, and we're hearing a lot of that in the media in the last couple of weeks also. Another factor I was intrigued with is the decline of the so-called nuclear family or the two-person family, two-parent family. We're seeing a lot of one-person individuals and, interestingly, no-parent individuals comprising the heads of families today. So this is a consideration that we all want to take into account to make certain that we've got an accurate research design and we're talking to the right people regarding the products and considerations that we're involved in research on. Something that we also heard a lot about in last year's election, it's the shrinking of the middle class. Although this graph may paint a picture that these middle income individuals are going into the upper income spectrum and less so to the lower end and the lower income spectrum, I'm not certain of that. I do know one takeaway is that the share of Americans who are in middle class households is certainly shrinking. And again, a consideration you as researchers want to take into account in your research designs. Age, although the chart previous to this with the millennial information on it points towards the growth of younger aged cohorts, there's also another cohort that's increasing in its importance in today's society, and that's the older individuals, people who are 65 years and older. With the increase of lifespans and expectancies, and this is global in addition to the United States, the world will increasingly age. So you'll want to take this into account with the products that you're working on and the research design that you're creating for your clients. So when we look at the importance of understanding diversity, I thought this was an especially pertinent piece of information that in just the United States, the multicultural marketplace has increased by a factor of around 4 times. In other words, going from $661 billion in 1990 upwards to $3.5 trillion. That's a large share of the U.S. marketplace that we're seeing today. It's roughly double the growth of the typical consumer in terms of their buying power. So you're seeing a lot of your marketing counterparts and executives, they're paying attention to these different multicultural marketing places that you see especially on the West Coast, you see in the Southwest, and you see in the Northeast, and you see in the Southeast across the United States. The core of the country may not be seeing as much of this, but the diversity is certainly something to take into account across the rest of the country. So this gives rise to the question, why biometrics? Why would we employ biometrics in our research right now to help us understand this diversity? So this was an interesting chart that I put together when I saw how much of actual attention decision-making is driven by memory, learning, the decision-making factors that are really, they're subconscious. Roughly 90% of the information that you're processing to make a decision, it's in your subconscious. This is happening in a split second. 10% of the information going into a decision is driven by the conscious processing, where you're actually thinking about pricing or color or something along those lines. So when you're looking at that new car, it's going to be something along the lines of brand, the sportiness, the color, and things like that that are happening very fast in the reactions, as opposed to the more so-called rational considerations such as price and the like. We see what comprises subconscious processing down at the bottom. It's the emotional reactions that biometrics is measuring. It's the instinct, it's the habits, it's the gut feelings. The conscious thinking, again, it's a lot less of a component of the thinking that we'd all like to believe that we're actually employing. So, biometrics. Why are we actually using biometrics in the research that we're doing right now? It's really the fact that the body doesn't lie. When you're looking across this diversity that we painted a picture of a bit earlier, you've got the physiological reactions to the stimuli that you're testing on. They're consistent across cultures. When someone is excited, when someone is turned off, when someone finds something appealing, this is consistent across different levels of cultures. Whereas you as a researcher, when you ask a question coming from your culture of an individual who may be from another culture, they may interpret your question differently than you intended, and the answer that you get back, you may again analyze or interpret differently than the person meant to send. So what does biometrics allow us to actually measure? It allows us to help validate some of the self-reported or the answers that the participants are giving to us, so the observations that you're seeing. This tells us how the participant actually feeling during the tasks that you're asking them to undertake. You're also able to understand, are they confused? Are they anxious? Are they frustrated with something that you're asking them to do? The eye tracking gives an interesting piece of information in terms of where is the person's gaze and concentration at on the page. What are they noticing? What are they noticing first? What are they noticing second? What are they noticing third? This allows you to understand the flow of attention. Is it going in the way that you and your counterparts in design anticipated, or is it something that leads a person to actual confusion? They start on the second step and go to the third step. Another aspect of biometrics, and we'll show a little bit of this toward the end of the presentation, is you've got a lot of different data elements that we're collecting, a large number of different elements. So what you'll want to do is triangulate all of these bodies of information to allow you to test and validate the constructs that you and your counterparts may have imagined in your mind. Is this actually true or not? It also allows you to understand the qualitative that much better, how a person is feeling in addition to what they're saying. Another strength of the biometric information that you're receiving, it's independent of the qualitative feedback that you may be receiving. It's explicit performance information that shows how a person is actually performing on the tasks that they're undertaking right now. This biometrics also allows you to avoid a certain set of biases, if you will. So-called outliers can be uncovered. Someone who may appear to be more excited than they actually are by the stimuli that they're involved with. It allows you to also interpret questions and answers better than merely taking face value of what's being repeated back to you. Another strength of biometric research is being able to capture the so-called micro expressions, something that may occur in a split second on a person's face or in a person's body that you may not actually see as a researcher. You may be staring at the keyboard or something else and miss that, whereas the biometrics captures that information in addition to it being filmed on camera for you for later analysis. So there's really kind of two vectors or factors that we're looking at when we're looking at biometrics. It's really how positive is the emotion that someone is experiencing, and what's that intensity of that particular feeling. Is it a positive? Is it a negative emotion? Is it a very strong reaction, or is it a very weak reaction? This is something that biometrics allows you, the UX researcher, to capture. So we're going to talk about 4 different metrics that Keyline has chosen to synthesize and analyze in the biometric research that we're actually conducting. There's a variety of different information elements that one can capture, but these are the ones after a lot of research that we chose to focus on. You've got facial electromyography, or EMG, you've got skin conductance, and you've got heart rate, and you've got eye tracking that we're capturing. I'm going to go into detail on what each of these 4 factors or metrics are actually about. So when we look at what's actually happening in a biometric test, individuals, as shown on the right here, they're connected to a variety of different sensors that's going to allow us to measure these different body reactions, if you will. The four of these are the facial EMG, which tracks the positive and negative emotions a person is actually feeling. This is considered the so-called gold standard for measuring emotional valence right now. Skin conductance, GSR, galvanic skin response, measures the emotional stimulation associated with pleasure or displeasure or anxiety. So this is allowing us to track the arousal a participant has regarding the stimuli that you're presenting with them. The heart rate actually attracts attention. Slow heart rates show that a person is focused. Fast heart rates show that a person is less focused in. So this, again, is combined with the other metrics and information that we're collecting to measure responses to stimuli and what the brain is actually concentrating on. The fourth element that we've chosen to focus on is eye tracking. And again, it's a unique piece of information. Roughly 90% of the information that is collected by the human body goes through the eye. So measuring this, it's relatively important. You'll be able to tell where is the person's eyes traveling when they're looking at a page. Is it on the first step that you intended them to focus on and going to the second step and third step and so on? Or is there some form of confusion or misorder that's actually happening here? Eye tracking data also allows us to see what viewers are really seeing on a site or an application versus what they tell you they are, and what are the elements that they're concentrating on that particular page. So biometric data like this, it's combined to a baseline that's evoked from the tasks being performed across a set of tasks. So the individuals their responses will be aggregated, and that will be the metrics in comparison to an individual to see if there's something that's a significant difference here. So real quickly, we've gone over a lot of different metrics and sensors that we're talking about, and really what are they actually measuring here. So you'll see that eye tracking and galvanic skin response and the electroencephalography, sorry, it's a tough word, and are measuring the arousal aspect of it. You'll see the facial expression analysis and the EEG and the EMG are actually measuring the valence, or the positive and negative aspect of the sentiments are being expressed here. So when you're involved in biometrics testing, and you as the UX researcher, what's actually happening in the lab or the facility that you're going to experience here? Well, the first thing you're going to see is participants. They're going to be hooked up to the sensors, and they're going to be walked through the testing procedures. A camera will film the entire session, both the discussion and the biometric testing. People are actually instructed to think out loud and provide us feedback on actually what's occurring with them, what are their perceptions. So we measure that feedback in correlation to what the body's actually telling us. In the observation room, you have the opportunity to walk through exactly what's happening right here. You'll have the researcher who can actually instruct you or tell you what their perceptions or their conclusions are from the testing that's occurring in the other room that may differ from what you're seeing in the observation room. You'll have the opportunity to observe the participant, where they're going on this. You'll see their actual movements across the screen with the eye tracking technology that we have, and you'll also see the reactions from the biometric data screens too. Everything is captured on and off screen, and we have a note taker who's capturing significant moments across all of the research tasks and responses that are occurring here. So there's a lot of information that's being collected, and some of which you can see in real time. So in this chart, when I put this together, it was just to show you the volume of information that's involved in the analysis that's going to be on our side of the coin. What do we actually have to pay attention to? So it's eye tracking, it's the effectiva statistics, it's the head positioning, it's the summary scores, it's the EMG data, how they're actually responding sensory-wise, survey data. You're seeing the voice and the camera feedback that's coming at you. In addition to that, we'll perform an eye tracking analysis and the facial expression analysis. This can be a lot of the core aspects of a biometric analysis. We've got the analysis that's going to be focusing on what are people reacting to and what's the strength of that reaction. We'll have the correlations, the statistical correlations between what's being shown to them, what's their reaction to that, and are there any patterns that are actually occurring here? And we'll also have analysis of the participants in a follow-up interview. You'll also see different trends throughout the research that's being conducted. Is there something that we're finding that's consistently confusing or exciting or the like? And again, this is all, the findings are typically are based on qualitative information here. So what's possible and what are the limitations of biometric research, if you will? So what we can do is that you can get real-time collection of biometric data if it's co-located, and we're able to do that from a technical perspective. If it's remote, and let's say you're doing something internationally, you're testing, and you're still in the United States, that may be more difficult, if you will. The metrics and measurements that we're going to use to evaluate the experiences, these are selected ahead of time. So we know what we're measuring on. We know, and you, the client, and the researchers, we're agreeing on that. The real-time tagging, I think, is something that's especially powerful. And what I mean by that is collecting these micro moments that we as people may not be able to see with the physiological reactions at that particular time. When you see a facial expression or an eye expression or eye movement, we can correlate that with the language feedback that they're giving to us too. As you saw before, there's a lot of information and data that's actually being collected here. So data is not processed in a real-time type of sense of the word. It's going to occur later on, and it probably will take up to a week to process all of the information and get it down correctly. So what your takeaway in the research of the laboratory is may not ultimately be correct, if you will, following the analysis that comes out a week or so later. Also, again, due to the network capabilities, live streaming may be limited. So you may not see as fast a speed for information coming back from Paris or Mexico City in San Francisco or Boston. So what are the conclusions that we've had on biometrics? And these are people. These are also known as your UX participants. They're very, very variable. And I know all of you have seen this in the research that you're doing today. The reactions or the responses that they give you as a researcher and your interpretation of those responses, they're typically conditioned on each of our respective cultural backgrounds. We may not think the same way as they do, and that can impact your analysis. I also would caution you that biometrics research, it's just one means of circumventing this cultural bias and this difference in individuals. It's one research tool, and what we're seeing is that to triangulate or combine biometrics with other research data collection processes, which can include qualitative and quantitative data collection tools, can give you ultimately the best answer and deliver you, the UX researcher, the true insights that you're expecting back to your clients. And that's what I have for you today. If there's any follow-up questions, if we have any time at all, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Steve. Actually, we do have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is, when or what is a good topic to employ with UX research?
That's a great question. That's a great question, Anna Carla. I think our experience has shown that some topics are not as appropriate for biometric research, and some are more so, and I'll describe that. And I think it's common sense that you would probably intuit yourselves as good UX researchers. By that I mean stimuli that's meant to excite someone. So let's say that it's an exciting automobile or car commercial or something along those lines. That's a good topic to bring into biometric research, to see someone is responding to excitable stimuli, if you will. Something that's more pedestrian or more mundane, such as accounting information or a spreadsheet application or something along those lines, might not be as appropriate because you're not going to see an emotional reaction on the participant's part, and you might misinterpret the conclusions or the findings there. Hopefully that answers that question, Anna Carla.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
The next question is, what are some of the drawbacks of biometrics research today?
Yeah, I think of one key aspect, and it's related to the prior question. It's a misapplication of the tool. In other words, you use biometrics research and to answer the wrong question. Consequently, the data that comes back to you may be understated in terms of the effectiveness of the content or the stimuli that you're showing a participant. In other words, you may misinterpret the fact that they actually were happy with the stimuli or the content that was provided them, and the data may show that it's less than underwhelming. And we've seen that even in the last couple of months where there wasn't that much insight that was delivered by the biometrics in addition to the regular UX research that we're doing. So.
Thank you, Steve. The next question,
Sure.
You say various measures are independent. Do you mean that they are merely collected independently or that they are literally independent?
Yeah, it's they're typically collected independent of each other. So when I mentioned the different sensors that are attached to the body, so you've got the eye tracking, you've got the skin conductance, you've got the heart monitor. These are independent data streams, as is the qualitative feedback, and to a certain extent, the quantitative feedback in terms of the survey responses people are getting. So you've got different streams of information that are coming back that, like, ideally, you can triangulate to tell what the real story at hand is, as opposed to a misinterpretation. So they're independent of each other.
Thank you. The next question, specifically, how do you measure the baseline biometric reading? Do you compare it to control stimuli, or do you use an individual's biometric reading?
Yeah, what we do is that we'll pool the responses from the test group to get our baseline to compare back to an individual's responses. So that's the comparison statistics that we're actually using here.
Thank you, Steve. We have several more questions, but I think what we will do is that we will have Steve answer those, and we will distribute them to the group. I appreciate everybody joining and taking the time to join our webinar today. We will be sending out the link to the webinar, as well as the PDF to the presentation and the answers to the questions. So thank you for joining us today. Goodbye, everyone.